is why we're building the Hammer and Anvil Society, the ultimate discipleship community for Christian men. With weekly cohort calls, a full library of resources and courses, weekly challenges, and live teaching, you're going to sharpen your mind and your character.
See? You and this car were made for each other. Why fight it? Sure, I got a couple other buyers on the line, but I like your style. So, what do you say? Should we start up the paperwork?
Let me think about it. Hold it for me for a day, okay?
Hey, because it's you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my show. I have Kent Hovind, CPA here. Hello from Tornado Alley. Yeah. I'm glad I don't live in... I live in Fire Central, not Tornado Alley. I left... Well, I mean, I'm originally from Michigan, so Michigan did have its fair share of tornadoes, but not as many as other parts of the country. Oklahoma, Kansas... What's interesting is I believe in Michigan, or at least at one time, I don't know if like climate change has affected that or not, but there was at one point an area in Michigan, like central part of Michigan, that was I guess you could say, for lack of factionally colloquially referred to as Missouri Ozarks. Yeah. But yeah, there was a section there that was kind of like they referred to it as Tornado Alley because this one part of Michigan, where it just seemed to be that area was more prominent for tornadoes than any other part of the state. All right, so I got 5 people here. So this is nothing. There's no dumpster fire here or anything. What I'm going to be covering is based on so this conversation happened between Dr. Josh and Joel Settecase, and there's no debate here, right? They don't debate any one particular topic. They basically go in, Dr. Josh goes in there and they have a discussion on like what they might debate, what they might have a debate about. So there's no so it's a debate on what to debate, if you wanted to be that charitable. And it seemed like it started, if you watch this particular live stream from Joel Settecase over at the Think Institute, there were challenges. Dr. Kip Davis was in the live chat kind of, poking the bear a little bit. Yeah, Michael Deaton, a debate about having debate was debated, but unfortunately all involved decided that debating it again was too much effort. Yeah, yeah. I think Michael just summed it up quite nicely. So Kip Davis, if I remember correctly, and I didn't watch all of this from beginning to end, this whole live stream. I did watch the entirety of his conversation, Joel's conversation with Dr. Josh. But it did seem, from kind of scrolling through, it did seem to kind of happen or start off with Dr. Kip Davis kind of poking the bear a little bit. And then you can see there from the screen that I'm sharing, Dr. Josh says, well, have me up for a minute, right? And there was some, it's funny because in this video, there was like some confusion because he goes, oh, it's this Megan person. And he's like, well, I'm confused. Like, who's this Megan person? And like, I thought this was Megan, and now all of a sudden it's this Josh person, or this Dr. Bowen person or whatever. And he's like, I'm still unsure. And I'm like, what, you can't figure out that there's two people to digital Hammurabi, but you can figure out there's three beings to one triune entity. That was funny. But I'm not going to get into that. It was just funny to me. I'm like, what, you having a problem wrapping your head around two people being, doing digital Hammurabi? It's kind of like the Think Institute. Like the Think Institute, if I remember, if now I don't know this for sure, but I think a lot of what happens with the Think Institute is like a collaboration between Joel there, yes, and I have it paused with his mouth open again. But it's like a collaboration between him and Wi-Fi Gospel. Now, here's the funny thing, transgender Hammurabi. Yeah. Here's the thing. He thought Megan transitioned into Josh. Maybe that is the case. I don't know. But here's the funny thing about this. So what happened is they have this conversation, and I'll bring up why I'm why I'm reviewing it. Because there was some active listening, I think, quote unquote, active listening that was taking place on the part of Joel here, where his active listening wasn't working the way he wanted it to work, right? It still seemed that he had a hard time kind of figuring out what it was that Dr. Josh prefers to debate about, or if he does have debates about anything. And long story short, it's, Joel here, he likes the whole presuppositional thing, right? Which the presuppositional, he always talks about, presup is an excellent defense for the Christian worldview. No, it is not. It's a burden shift. Essentially, what happens when a person who is a non-believer comes in of any kind of stripe, comes in and has a conversation with someone like Joel, it ultimately turns into them having the burden, right? They got to show what's under the hood in order to know exactly how to use everything, because Joel already knows what's all under the hood and knows exactly where it all comes from. So he's fine using it, and he can use it just fine. But these other people, well, they're using it, but they're denying it in their unrighteousness, the very thing that it's grounded in. They know the maker of logic and intelligibility, but they it's funny. So, but with that being said, I've got 7 viewers already, so I'm just going to get this started. Maybe if Dr. Josh is around, maybe he can come in later if he wants to. I think he might still be working. But if Dr. Josh wants to come in, kind of explain his side, I don't think Dr. Josh needs to explain his side. I think Dr. Josh does a fine job explaining exactly what it is that he would want to debate, if they were to have a debate or they were to have a one-on-one discussion. And it doesn't seem to really dawn on Joel until near the end of the conversation that I see. But here we go. But here's a funny thing. I'll skip through. I want to show this part here, because this is Dr. Josh that had me up for a minute. There's a little bit of a lull because when Dr. Josh was here, Dr. Josh was working at the time. Or he was at work at the time. So there was a little bit of a gap where he had like posted a link, and then Dr. Josh missed the link, and then somebody messaged him, and he went back to it. But we'll just go from there.
Was on YouTube. So I don't know. Look, Kip Davis says everyone can see.
So everyone can see, and the reason I'm pointing this out is because it's actually pretty important. Everyone can see that you're ducking a conversation about the Bible. You are doing this because you cannot defend it.
This is an older comment. Everyone can see that you are ducking a conversation about the Bible. You are doing this because you cannot defend it. No, not in any way, shape, or form. But I'm also.
Spoiler alert, kind of turns out that way.
Also not going to adopt your godless, what am I going to say? I'm not going to accept your godless worldview and your godless presupposition.
Nobody has a godless worldview, Joel. The godless worldview is a superficial position that is epistemically put on the non-believer to deny what you know to be ontologically the case for all believers. So you need to stop with that shit, like right now.
Suppositions which are arbitrary in order to argue on behalf of the Bible being
As
my
compared to a God being that which is arbitrarily defines what logic is? At least within this reality? I mean, just a question.
foundation. If you want to talk about the existence of God or God's,
When I say arbitrarily, I'm not just saying on a whim. It's an entity that is the ruler of all. It is an ontological primary for all other ontologies. It dictates everything. So arbitrary is definitely the right word to use.
necessity,
But in the sense of like more like being a monarch or a ruler, the thing that has to say in everything.
necessity of God for morality or intelligibility, I'll argue that with you. But I'm not going to do, as Seitan Bruggencate says, I'm not going to do a Bible study with unbelievers. Not in a debate.
See, that's, yeah, right there. So he did say it. Now, he should have repeated that with Dr. Josh, but he didn't. And he could have just said it and saved like the 20 minutes or 20 some minutes of time that they actually talk. But he doesn't do that.
That would be totally fruitless, because I would have to grant your presuppositions.
Everybody
in
has
order
the same presupposition. You don't have to grant the presupposition. Your position is everybody has the same presuppositions necessarily, because everybody has intelligibility. That's the reason why we all know God to exist, right? We all have logic. We all have reason, right? We all have intelligibility. We can all know things. That's how we can communicate with one another. So you need to stop denying the fact that God exists, because here you are using logic and intelligibility and reason. And you have this sense perception thing, right? So you can already see the dodge already forming. The dodge automatically comes about. That's why there's no point in having a conversation with the presupp, because what happens is non-believers come in, and I saw this with Stranglewood. It's a guy named Stranglewood. There's another video. I might review that one later. It's a guy that he came in there. He's a non-believer, and they were talking about logic. He comes in there and he starts offering explanations, alternatives. Don't ever fucking do that. There's no point in offering them anything. These guys are locked in. You have to actually go about eliminating presuppositional apologetics internally. You can't use something from the outside to defeat their presuppositional position. You have to examine the presuppositional apologetics position from internally, and then look for the weaknesses within it. That's the only way that you can do it. And you have to ask them questions about it. They're the ones that are saying they know how to use it, right? It's the defeater, right? It's the baddest of the badasses of all kinds of like ways of talking to non-believers. And then they say it's a really great defense, which it's never a defense. It's always a burden shift from what I've seen.
To argue against them. And I'm not going to throw down my sword in a sword fight. That would be silly. Okay.
See, I'm not going to throw it down. Now, a sword is used for offensive, is an offense. That's an offensive weapon. He says he always touts that presuppositionalism is the best defense. That's a shield. So already his analogies are kind of shaky, right? He wants to use presuppositionalism just like Darth Dawkins does, just like J. Robin does, just like a lot of these people do, because it puts the person who's saying, I'm not convinced of X, on their heels, because now what they start doing is they start saying, well, how do you ground logic and reason? And if they go, I don't know, see, I win. I grounded in God. Cool. And if you can't defeat it, fuck off. My position holds as being true until such time you can actually defeat it. Or at least that seems to be what's insinuated. I don't think they ever really outright say it.
At this point, the comments are just getting fun. Calming Waves Julian says, tattooed? Gonna have to get that lased off if he deconverts. Why? Oh, if he's not gonna deconvert, man, we're Calvinists.
Well, don't. Be careful. Brett McLaughlin did.
Perseverance of the saints, brother. All right.
Which is interesting because he calls himself a Calvinist. I didn't think Calvinists could they kind of associate them. I guess are they Protestants? They might as well be, I guess.
Daniel Addy says that makes. I don't.
Let me skip through.
Since you this video, the truth is true and is certain and is absolute. God is really there. The triune God of Scripture is really there. Is
Hold on.
absolute certainty that God's word is true and is certain and is absolute. God is really there. The triune God of Scripture is really there. We want more people.
Not according to Unitarians. Sorry, Joel. Mormons don't hold that the God of the Bible is a Trinitarian God, and neither did the Jews.
People to know that truth. Why? So that Joel Settecase can become more famous? No.
So they can know that truth. I thought your position is that everybody does know that truth. Is that what he said? I think I remember hearing that before.
Absolute certainty that God's word is true and is certain and is absolute. God is really there. The triune God of Scripture is really there. We want more people to know that truth.
You want people to know that truth. No, you don't. You want people to know that they're denying what they know. Right? That's being consistent with the presuppositional position. You want people to know that they are denying in their unrighteousness what they already know, and to stop denying what they already know.
Why? So that Joel Settecase can become you. It's not about the start in accordance with the script. Going to thethink.institute. Yeah, but it's truth and inerrancy. Until next time, I hope it made you think. Oh, here he is.
Sorry
Josh
about
Bowen,
that.
what happened?
Lincoln.
You're here.
Okay,
You want to debate, right? You guys want to do a debate, but
Yeah, so yeah, let me
you only
see.
want-
Okay, yeah. Okay, so here it is. So you guys want to do a debate. So here's the setup of the conversation, right? So there is no debate here, none whatsoever. It's you guys want to debate. So as far as it's when that starts like that, that is setting up like, oh, okay. So if we're going to do a debate, what do you want to debate about? So that's what this conversation is. What topic? Like, what do you want to do here?
you want to debate, right? You guys want to do a debate, but
Yeah, so yeah, let
when
me
you
see
only
if
want
I
to
can-
debate on your terms or what?
Yeah, so let me see if I can explain the thought here. The critique. So I don't know if you know who Darth Dawkins is. If you're
I do.
familiar
Do you,
with
Josh? Real quick, do you have video?
that. I do. I'm at work.
Okay,
So I don't.
then
Yeah.
I'm gonna just
Okay,
make
yeah.
myself full screen.
Yeah, I
Okay,
got
go
you. I
ahead.
got you. You know, so I had a conversation with him several years ago now, where he kind of.
That's so funny. You can't leave that there. You can't just look. Everybody should just see me. Do you have a video? No. Oh, okay, let's just get rid of that. Like, you can't keep that up. At least there's a picture. I mean, I can understand, like, if it was like a blank screen or if it was just the icon with nothing in it. But there was a picture of Dr. Josh right there. Oh, you know, okay. Well, I mean, it's his show, but still, that's kind of funny.
I don't want to say it's kind of a little bit of ambush. It's on YouTube. People can go watch it.
Who ambushed who?
Darth Dawkins. I came into a Discord room. It was like my second time ever going into a
Now, all Dr. Josh is basically talking about is like not really discussing presuppositionalism.
Discord room, and he said, "Is that Joshua Bowen from Digital Hammurabi?" And I'm like sitting there doing paperwork, and I just scramble to like get my phone to turn back on and say, yeah, it's me. And he goes, all right, so defend your atheism.
Yeah,
I'm like,
Dr. Josh thought it was a
"Oh,
fan that wanted to
I'm not
pat him on the back.
really. That's not my thing. Anyway, but I ended up talking to him about presuppositionalism for like an hour and a half, and I mean, it was a fine conversation, but
No, it wasn't.
I'm not a philosopher, right? So I mean, that's just not what I do. So my PhD is in ancient Near Eastern studies, and so like ancient texts, the Hebrew Bible, that's what I do. So, I would say if you want somebody to engage about, the grounds of morality or presupposition, you probably should talk to a philosopher. But that's definitely not me. My critique, though,
No point in pausing right now, folks.
and it seems to stand here, Joel, is that when a problem with the text, particularly the Hebrew Bible, is surfaced. I was watching a conversation that you were having with someone who I don't remember, and he asked you a question. I think it was about slavery, but I don't remember. And your response, if I'm remembering, and I'm paraphrasing, was essentially like, well, like, how do you know that anything is wrong? Or like, how do you know that slavery is wrong? Or something to that effect.
Okay.
And it seemed to be saying, not engaging with the difficulty in the text, right? The interpretive crux in the text.
Oh, sorry. My mic was on mute. Yeah, so yeah, I just paused it for a second. I'm going to step out. And can you guys still hear me? You guys can hear me, right? Just making sure, because my headset, if I flip the mic up, the mic automatically goes. Oh, here we go. Okay. Hey,
Well,
what?
yeah, I remember you. We were talking about this earlier this week and the
Yeah.
last.
Yes. Oh, apologies, folks. Yeah, I paused it and then I thought I had unmuted or I had dropped my mic so that people could hear me, but I didn't. So I just wanted to pause it for a minute so I could put an invite out for anybody who wanted to join. So, and then when I saw people going, it just froze. Is something wrong? I'm like, oh shit! I'm just talking into an empty room right now. Are you there, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So, there hasn't been any new developments with this?
Oh, I don't think there ever will be. Well, there was. I mean, there was a development, but that comes up later. Because the reason I'm taking it from this is because there was a video that came out. So, I think Wi-Fi Gospel does this. This is just because, like I said, I think this is like a collaboration between Joel and Wi-Fi Gospel. And there was this section that was taken out. This portion was basically segmented out and made into a standalone video. And the description was, let's say, a little bit dishonest.
Yeah.
Originally, it said something like, PhD atheist wants to have a conversation about ethics and God. Or ethics and God, or something like that, which is never, as you can see here, it doesn't sound like that's where Dr. Josh is going at all. And then I am going to go to that video because there's some interesting comments in there in the comment thread that basically there's a couple people, or there's one person specifically that points out that it seemed like Joel was being very dishonest with this. Right, that he wanted to talk about ethics and God, but anybody who listens to the conversation between the two of them, no.
Yeah, and the point that he's making here is just like, look,
I don't deal with precept.
And Joel is, or Josh is saying, like, look, somebody reads something in the Bible, they have trouble with the text, they bring it to you guys, and then you switch it around to make it about whether or not they can evaluate morality because they have questions and doubts. And it doesn't, it's just, instead of dealing with whatever their confusion is and trying to address what's going on with the text, you now make it about the person asking the question and then throw out this thing like, well, who are you to even ask questions? Like, oh, okay. So
Possibly, but Dr. Josh never really says that explicitly.
What I don't understand, I don't understand why presuppers don't just come out and do this. But essentially, I mean, Bonson probably this appealed to him. This is the same shut your mouth and follow orders kind of evangelical Christianity that most people get, at least in America, and it's not healthy.
Well,
And
were you here when I played the part earlier in this video where he said we want people to know God? And I paused it.
we already
You don't.
Yeah, like if you really believe in the precept apologetic, then you know that we already know that there's a God and believe it.
We're denying it.
We're denying it, right? And if there is some way that we couldn't know, then you'd have to explain how that works. Because if that's not, I can't choose to not know something I already know. That's not how cognition works. So what's blocking me from being aware of this knowledge that supposedly we all have? And then to turn around,
one word, unrighteousness.
But then to turn around and say, well, I don't do Bible studies with non-believers. Like, motherfucker, if you believe that the Bible is special revelation, wouldn't you want to expose non-believers to it as many times as you had an opportunity to?
Yeah,
like,
but
that does not make any sense.
I think that's a way of blocking the fact that I think there's kind of a problem here, because there's this issue where like I've talked about it before, where Joel insists that it's a very solid worldview. It's it's well grounded. There's nothing wrong with it at all, and yet you have all of these different Christologies, eschatologies, and soteriologies out there. You have Unitarians, for crying out loud, that believe in Jesus, but they don't believe in a triune entity, and yet they're Christians. So how do you reconcile their Christian worldview with your Christian worldview? They're not denying Jesus. They're not denying knowing God. They
just disagree on some kind of theological concept.
Yeah, it's a theological concept. But if the worldview is true, all the 100%, there shouldn't be any ambiguity when it comes to the actual nature of God himself and all that shit.
Yeah, and the other thing too that he's kind of throwing around is that like he's not going to do something with like somebody godless like Dr. Kip. Like, okay, Kip is not an atheist.
Well, nobody's godless.
Well, there's that issue too. But even if you wanted to try to say this kind of thing, well, I'm not doing this with unbelievers. Everybody believes, Joel. In fact, actually, belief doesn't really even factor into this version of precept. Is so fucking horrible that it basically removes faith as a virtuous thing in Christianity. You know it. You already know there's a God. It's just somehow or another you're lying to yourself. You're in denial in some insipid Freudian sense, which would not have been a concept back when people wrote that crap. When Paul wrote that stuff. So it's like, okay, what's wrong with you? Like, why? Like, that's really the heart of the problem. Like, if these guys were interested in studying this stuff and really knowing the Bible, they would probably get into some actual study with actual scholars, not this.
No,
there's I mean, anybody that's attracted to attempting a ministry using these apologetic methods, that's automatically a red flag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because it's like you seem to be fascinated with rhetorical strategies that allow you to manipulate people into getting what you want, as opposed to actually engaging people who have questions and doubts.
Yeah, and I don't know, and like what he said earlier in this video that I played, where not Dr. Josh, but Joel said, "I'm not going to put down my sword." I'm like, the sword should, and I'm just thinking about this now because I said, well, it's not a sword; it's supposed to be for defense, not offense. So it's a shield. So, but here's the other thing: why would you not? In my opinion, if you want to call something the sword, it should be the word itself. It should be the word of God or the Bible itself, which you wouldn't be putting down. You would be discussing the merits of that sword.
Yeah, these guys
right?
think, I mean, yeah, and it's really sad to see them think that like if the presuppositional apologetic cannot be surrendered in any way, like I can't sit down and have a conversation with you from your perspective of being a doubter, because that automatically cedes the position to you. Like, no, it fucking doesn't. Because if that person has the capacity to doubt in your ontology, that doubt is of God.
Mhm.
That has something to do with his plan. The fact that you won't acknowledge that means that you have not really thought about this precept apologetic beyond the fact that, like, ooh, I've listened to Bonson a few times. I watched Side 10 Bruggencate in action. What we can do is just insist that we're right. And anytime they have questions, we just question their ability to even really think things through. Like, that's
Mhm.
precisely what they're wondering about you, Joel.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'll continue this. I'm gonna turn this up to 1 1/4. I'm hoping Dr. Josh might show up for this, and maybe he can, because I texted back and forth when the other video came out and Dr. Josh saw it. As soon as I got the text from him, I'm like, I already know what this is about, and it has to do with that description in that video. And the other video, the video that they made as a standalone of this conversation, and I was like, yeah, this is, I already knew. And so it was kind of funny. Dr. Josh is like, yeah, he's saying I wanted to talk, Dr. Josh, he's saying I wanted to talk about ethics and God. I said nothing about that, He didn't say that explicitly, but it's essentially what he's doing. No, I wanted, Dr. Josh is all about like a literary and historical critique, not this philosophical brouhaha.
Next, and instead moving off of that topic right into this presuppositionalist argument.
So,
And
okay, real quick. What do I call you? Dr. Is it Bowen? Bowen? Do I call you Joshua?
Bowen,
John?
you can call me Josh. It's fine.
Josh. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So not engaging with the difficulty of the text. So
You can call me next time he sees him. No, you can call me Dr. Bowen.
You will call me Dr. Bowen.
you're assuming that a text about slavery, for example, would be difficult, right?
I mean, I think from your own lights, it would be.
From my own lights, I've got an entirely biblical perspective on that. So yeah,
You think slavery is immoral, right?
I think that under certain circumstances it is. Yeah, I think
so
that
like owning other people's property and passing them on as inheritance, that would be immoral.
Under the old covenant, it wasn't. No.
Yeah.
Under the old covenant, God gives stipulations to regulate an institution which had been around since probably pretty close to creation, and in the new covenant,
it's interesting that he brings this up as though that this particular thing could have just popped out of nowhere.
Why would you? Okay. If you understand the difference between the old covenant and the new covenant, then you should understand that the old covenant established by God with the people, with the Israelites, was about separating them, taking them back to their land, giving them the land of Canaan, right? Mm-hmm. Establishing a nation for them that is completely separate from the other ones around them. They were told to wipe out the Midianites and the Amalekites and the Perizzites and the Jebusites. All these other people had to go, and they were justified. Hang on, they were justified in doing that because those cultures had bad stuff in them.
Yeah, well, the Midianites and the Amalekites weren't originally under the ban.
I'm just saying that as a thing, right? The point of their covenant relationship was that they were supposed to be set apart. And this apologetic God established in the original covenant a system of regulating the institution of slavery that existed in all these other cultures. The point of the Israelites was that they weren't supposed to be like any of the other cultures around them.
And the other problem is that assumes that like the other nations around them didn't have rules regulating their forms of slavery, like we clearly see in like the laws of Arnamu.
They were actually lighter.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, that's not going to hold water, and it also does not make sense. Why would God's morality need to shift on a spectrum with people from the old covenant to the new covenant? That makes no sense, especially when he is demanding that they do things they don't want to do. Like when they're wandering around.
Can you say arbitrary, Michael?
Yeah. When they're wandering around and they're not eating their own meat, right? Their meat is being sacrificed to, Yahweh day and night, and they're eating manna. They're kind of like, so God can establish crazy specific, strict misery-inducing conditions. And when the people complain about it, he inflicts more harm on them.
Yeah.
But slavery, he couldn't quite squash that.
Yep.
That's not.
But he did in Jeremiah 34 when he squashed it when it came to Israelites having their fellow Israelites as indentured servants.
Well, yeah, in a way, he sends prophets over there to shame them and be like, hey, you're not supposed to be doing that with Israelites.
Yeah, and the only reason why he said that they can't be doing it with Israelites anymore was because they weren't following the rule to release them on the sabbatical year, the 7th year.
Right.
Which, bear in mind, Jeremiah 34 doesn't actually bring up the problem with in Leviticus 25, where it's not a 7th year release or sabbatical year release. It's a Jubilee release, which is a 50th year release. But that's beside the point. You know what I'm saying? Which I still hear people confuse all the fucking time. In fact, I was just watching a video the other day, Deconstruction Zone, where Justin did the same thing. He talked about the 7th year release being the year of Jubilee. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
No, Justin, I thought you knew better than this. That's not a Jubilee release. That's the sabbatical year release that's talked about in Deuteronomy and Exodus. The one in Leviticus 25 is a 50th year release. There is no 7th year release for an Israelite indentured servant. It's for 50 years. But there's a lot of other things that can take place in order for that indentured Israelite to be, Leviticus literally points it out, like, here's this stage of impoverishment, here's this other stage, here's this other part. And if it comes to this point to where he sells himself to you, and all that kind of stuff, you can actually see the level of like impoverishment that they're addressing in Leviticus 25. But let me just continue with this here.
Nitty makes this comment here, is that I make the point this way: God's morality is subjective because there's a condition to change its odds and values, a sacrifice. So if morality is based on a condition, it just trails off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One could even describe that as being relativistic.
Yeah.
I'm willing to forgive you relative to the amount of goodies that you burn on a pyre for me or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Logic instilled there that ended up, that inspired Christians to abolish slavery twice, once in the Middle Ages.
So what he's referring to here is that God put stipulations and regulations on slavery that apparently no other nation seemed to have, so that eventually, based on these stipulations that God is imposing on the institution of slavery, which seems to, in his mind, be a given within the ontology of reality that God is the necessary precondition for, which he doesn't even want to look at, right? You can't have that without God, by the way. God is the ontological primary, so the only way you can have this slavery thing is how? God's the author of all. So here you have slavery. But this is all to basically set it up so that later on down the line in human development and human society, it will eventually be abolished, which doesn't change the fact that there are people who used Christianity, used the scriptures to defend slavery. There are people who are trying to use the Bible to say, oh, people need to not to abolish slavery, and then you had people using scripture to say, oh no, it needs to be upheld.
Right, but I mean, you notice that they never make this kind of setup when they're talking about something like pluralism. Like, religious pluralism is not allowed in ancient Israel. At least that's the quote. I mean, the very first of the commandments is, "Thou shalt have no other gods, right? But me." But that would have been a thing that was common throughout a lot of these different cultures, was the sharing of different religious faiths and traditions. That had to come to a complete and total stop. I mean, it was so ingrained in them that they just built a golden calf while Moses was up there getting the commandments dictated to him. Like they went right towards it.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been scholars like, oh yeah, I've even heard this in sermons from when I was a kid. Well, that was an influence from the other cultures where they came from. They came out of Egypt, and there's other cultures in there. It's just part of their cultural baggage. I'm like, yeah, which he stomped on. He told them under no circumstances and no conditions. There's no spectrum. There's no regulating pluralism.
Yeah, he put a plague. Yeah, when the
got to pass.
Yeah, when the Israelites were entertaining the ceremonial, or the way that the Midianites worshiped their god or gods, God struck them with a plague.
Yeah.
And then chapters later in Numbers, you see, oh, by the way, remember what happened with you and the Midianites and how I gave you guys a plague because you guys were doing this. He basically holds all of the Midianites accountable. So the plague was to hold the Israelites accountable for their acts by participating in these kind of these foreign, by doing these rituals and stuff with other foreign gods, with the Midianites. But then later on, oh, by the way, now you can go after them and you can kill them because of what happened. It's like, wait a minute, it was their fault. It was your people's fault. That's the reason why you struck them with a plague. It was their fault for doing it, not the Midianites. They did it. Now later on, now here comes, Numbers 30 or Numbers 31, where they're, oh yeah, let's go kill them all. And then, oh wait, you left some women? Yep. Oh, no. You can only have the women that haven't been with men.
In the more modern era, abolishing slavery
In the more modern era. Okay.
makes sense if you assume that the Bible is true and mankind has inherent dignity. So this is why we need.
But not,
you don't
not
get,
at all. Huh? Not at all times.
you don't necessarily get. You only have to be in certain churches for a few minutes to hear hymns and songs with the words, God forgave such a lowly worm as I. You do not get, you because you've got multiple books, you have lots of different messages going on. There are plenty of cases and plenty of places in the Bible where you will find out that you are shit. Our righteousness is as filthy rags to him. That does not sound like a human dignity affirming thing. The only way you get human dignity is through this notion of image bearers. We were made in the image of God, therefore do not kill each other, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't mean we're worth something. It just means God is.
Yeah.
That's not human dignity. That's just God's dignity. And the only way we get to share any of that is if we kiss up to Big Papa. I'm pretty sure that's where Joel's head is, other than,
Well, I don't know because I've actually mentioned that before because, one presuppositionalist that I know of who's very prominent here on YouTube, well, at least amongst this circle of individuals, is Darth Dawkins, which he has basically said human beings are basically pieces of crap.
Yeah.
And another person who holds to a more evidentialist position, not necessarily a presuppositionalist position, but likes the presuppositionalist argument, doesn't seem to have a problem with it, is Smokey Saint, where he refers to non-believers as cockroaches and pieces of, trash fit for the fire.
Right. Not exactly affirming human dignity.
Yeah. That human beings are just...
It's creating a rhetorical kind of an identity marker for these people to claim that they're better than.
Sure.
There's plenty of places, like, if you're paying attention to most of this stuff, you probably should not have a really high opinion of yourself, especially as a believer. But that doesn't stop these guys.
Well, I call it the extreme. Remember, I've compared Christians and other religious people to having like what I call the health freak mentality, right? I've realized something and I know better now, so I'm better than you.
Yeah, and it kind of is. Yeah, it's like the people that
I know something you don't know. Yeah, and I got
people that do TikTok videos because they figured out they can gargle with peroxide or something like that. Like, well, you can, but should you?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, like, I do this and and I know better, and trust me, you'll be a better like.
I like to see the blood in my gums after flossing explode once I introduce peroxide to it. That's the peroxide just blowing up cells.
Yeah.
Need to debate the moral reasoning behind this, because I can look at a passage, passages in Deuteronomy.
So now he's saying we need to debate the moral reasoning behind this.
Leviticus, and or the Gibeonites being made into water carriers and wood hewers, and I can go, oh man, what do I do with that? But I'm starting from a foundation that God is good and that there is such a thing as absolute morality and that human beings have dignity. If you don't start with that platform,
I don't know. Yeah, there's a problem with the good part because I would love to really get into that, but I'm not going to. But there is an ontology issue there. But because you're talking, just to bring this up, you're talking about an ontology of one from the very get-go, and then all other ontologies branching from that ontology. So, and then you say, well, that ontology of that being is that it's all good. And then you go, well, in the other ontologies that necessarily come from that particular ontology, there's these bad things. Please tell me how they got there. Well, you see.
Platform, if you believe that we are evolved through random processes, or at least unguided, even biological deterministic
oh my God, there's nothing inherently problematic in any way, shape, or form about human beings. If evolution is true, that evolution is just a status of the things created by a particular entity to change over time. This is not problematic in any way, logically or even metaphysically. So it's really stupid.
processes. You don't get a moral framework from that. So that's why I say, like, if we're talking about these passages being problematic, we need to explain why they're problematic.
They're problematic if you define the God as, like you said, you come up with a position from presupposing that God is all good. You have to, and you hold that God is the primary or the necessary precondition for all things. It instantiates and sustains everything. So now you have to reconcile. It becomes a problem of suffering, whether it be logical or evidential. You have a problem there. You have a reality that this God is the necessary precondition for, and yet you have these particular things. You have wickedness. You have man's wicked nature and all that. Who wrote for that? Who did that? Where did that come from? Oh, that came from Satan. And then you hear them talk, oh, that came from Lucifer. Where did Lucifer get it from? Well, Lucifer had it because of free will. Where does free will come? And it just goes on and on and on. And it's really kind of funny because people have a tendency to like play this game where they go, well, there's there's this field of possibilities. No, in the ontology of when you're dealing with a particular, everything starts with the one ontology, and all other ontologies come from that ontology. You don't have another field to play with. You only have the one ontology. You start with that and then branch out.
Answer as a Christian is going to be very different from yours. I'm not sure what are you an atheist?
So then it becomes a problem with but point being is that it becomes a problem. Where did the concept of slavery come from? Where did this idea of property come from? Not just in things that we own, like this idea of like, oh, this is mine and nobody should take anything that rightfully belongs to me. And then taking that same concept and then applying it to human beings. Where did that come from? How did that get written into this state, into this reality? And then they go, well, it happens because of wickedness. Where did wickedness come from? Free will. Who wrote for free will? Well, God did, but God doesn't want people to just always make the right choices. How did God write for people to make wrong choices? Where do the wrong choices come from? It's writing for everything. It's the ontological primary.
What's your world? What's your worldview? Okay, so that's really where the difficult.
That's what's your worldview. That's when Dr. Josh should have said, you know what my worldview is.
Yeah, according to your pet theory, it has to be the same as yours.
It's the same as yours. Everybody has the same worldview ontologically. They're just denying it in unrighteousness.
Difficulty is going to lie for you and me. I mean, I'm not going to adopt your worldview as if I believe it any more than I would expect. I'll do it for the sake of argument, but
you don't have to get into worldviews if you're talking about a literary and historical context of literature.
Well, not only that, but you don't. I mean, he's do it for the sake of argument. That's precisely what he's asking you to do. That's the point.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, thank you.
The point of being able to take it to try to adopt that and work the argument from the other side is to do an internal critique. What he's literally saying is, well, I'm never going to do an internal critique of atheism. I can't do it. Like,
I don't know why. He's an atheist. He is an atheist when he's not convinced of Zeus.
But he's trying to. But he's saying that he can't do that or he won't do that. But then is saying from our worldview, we can't be consistent about things like morality or make claims to know anything about logic, truth, beauty, etc.
You can.
How do you know that?
Automatically. Well, you
How do
have.
you know that unless you've
your-
done an internal critique of it, which you just said you refuse to do?
Yeah, well, the problem is, well, that's because the problem is that it boils down to the idea that everybody can do it because everybody doing it is the evidence for the God. It's not trees, therefore God. It's you think, therefore God.
Right.
Actually, he
but
actually said that.
He's contradicting the entire thing by saying,
I
I'm not going to cede this from your worldview. Like, what are
Yeah.
you doing?
Yeah. Yep.
True to what we believe here.
Sure. Yeah. So let me see if I can be more precise here. I won't engage in an argument about like whether it's why it's immoral to rape someone. Right. I just start there.
Well, we're not talking about rape. We're talking
No,
about
no, no.
sniffing.
And I'm just using it as an example, right?
Okay.
And so the same is true with owning another person as property.
So he's not. So now Dr. Josh is talking about he's not going to engage in the ethics. That's what Dr. Josh is saying. I'm not going to get into an ethical discussion or a moral discussion on this. Just pointing that out.
Right. Like I don't try to defend, why it's immoral to own another person's property. I just start there. Now I realize that leaves
Okay.
me not defending that position. I sleep well at night with that because that's not my field. Right. If I were an ethicist, I think it would be inconsistent of me. Or if I were an ethical philosopher, I think the onus would be on me to defend that position, but I'm not. Right. So the reason that I enter into these discussions is because when I hear critics, saying to Christian apologists, yeah, look, there's slavery in the Hebrew Bible, or there's genocide in the Hebrew Bible that's divinely commanded, and the apologist says, no, sort of like what you sort of
Now,
just
bear in mind, he's giving an example.
said here, right? Like it's regulating it. It's better than what was going on. That's just wrong, Joel. Right?
According to what standard?
No. Sorry.
He's just
You're-
giving it as an example. Like he missed it.
Yeah, he's so desperate to do what the apologist does, which is like, I'm not going to let you, a non-believer, tell me that the Bible's wrong about something. Like,
Yeah.
that's not the
So
point.
he missed the start of it, where he goes, "This is what I do." So if we're coming down to reading this, and you go, "Oh, well, this is what it's going to be." Oh, it's an improvement, right? These stipulations and this kind of regulation that God is imposing upon slavery is an improvement upon upon the institution of slavery. Then he would say, well, if you were to say that, then I would say that you're wrong. But this is an example. Dr. Josh is giving him an analogy. He's giving him an analogy, and
Well, he's actually saying that what he's doing, what he just did to Joel, is exactly what he's saying he should not be doing. Because the issue isn't like, I'm going to make this about you and whether or not you can make proclamations about what's right and what's wrong. Anybody from any perspective can be like, wait a minute, I heard some Christians talking about how proud they were of their faith and its influence on abolishing slavery in the United States. But when I read these parts of this book, it seems like slavery not only was, a legally ordained thing in these cultures, in the first covenant, the old covenant, but was ordained. Like, this is sanctioned.
Hydroxychloroquine.
So that's all they have to see. That inconsistency right there. We're like, wait a minute. Your religion springs from a tradition that had divinely regulated slavery. A divinely regulated institution of slavery. But then you're turning around and some of you are patting yourselves on the back because your ethics and morals grounded in that religion caused you to abolish it. You fought against it. And you guys are like the number one that they'll do that all the time. Despite the fact there were Christians using the Bible to defend the institution of U.S. slavery. Like this stuff, like you do not have to be a scholar to see that is very inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
And what Joel's doing here is like is the exact same thing. Like Josh, like, instead of dealing with that issue, you're going to come at me and say, "How can I say that rape is wrong or slavery is wrong? By what standard?" Okay, your standard. You're saying the Christian worldview is the standard, and that standard is inconsistent.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's not a value judgment. That is a fucking observation. You could be fine with it being inconsistent. In fact, it would be great if somebody would just say it is inconsistent. But they won't do that. And a loon like Joel won't do that because he's a fundy. His identity's too
Correct. You mean it's incorrect?
Yeah, that's right. So like it is an incorrect assessment of the law collections in the covenant code or in the the holiness code or the Deuteronomic laws to say that these are substantially improving on regulations on the social institution of slavery, right? They are on par with the rest of the nations.
Here comes the axiom.
I'm sorry, Josh, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No. So the reason that I come into this debate is essentially as a fact checker, right? So when an atheist and an apologist are having this discussion,
a fact checker from a literary and historical perspective, not an ethical one. Which I don't think that Joel's quite figured that one the fuck out.
Well, he said fact.
What'd you say?
No, Joel's got a smirk warming up that that is making me a little bit queasy.
Yeah, because you'll see where this is where he'll bring up axiology. I think it comes after this. But yeah, let me just go.
And the apologist, let's say the atheist says, "Oh, Exodus 21:20-21 is a handbook on how to beat your slave, within an inch of their life and get away with it." I step in and go, "No, that's a silly notion. That's not what the text is doing." When an apologist says, "Oh no, it's like it's not as bad. It's just bondservants. It's making great improvements on what was going on in the rest of the nation Near East," I stepped in and I said, "No, that's not true." Right? And here's why. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, and I respect your.
No, he fucking does not, and you'll see.
Yeah,
this to stay within your field. I want to say though, for someone who's not a philosopher, you're using words that you're using axiological terms. You're making value judgments, or you're at least discussing value judgments. Like,
no, he's not.
No, he's not. He's literally evaluating the consistency of claims made by other people about a text.
Yes, exactly.
They're saying that Exodus says you can beat your slave to within an inch of the line, and he's like, nope, it does not say that. He didn't say whether that would be good or bad.
And then if somebody says, well, this was an improvement, and he's saying, no, because it would be on par, because later on, I think Dr. Josh reiterates this, and he says, no, it's actually kind of on par with the rest of what we see historically within other ancient Near East cultures. But he took him saying improving as Dr. Josh making a value claim about something. And that's not what he's saying. He's saying another person is making the value claim because he's heard those conversations before. You will have a Christian apologist say, this is an improvement upon X. Just like you would have the atheist who says, well, these verses in Exodus 20 about beating your slaves basically leaves it open to just beat the shit out of your slave whenever you fucking feel like it. And he goes, no, that's not what the text is saying there either. So he's talking about a literary critique, not a value statement. There's no value judgment here. He's talking about the way people read these texts and the conclusions that they come to, how they evaluate the text. And Joel completely misses it. So now he's saying, well, now that you've said improvement, that is on you to basically show the value of that. That wasn't Dr. Josh's position. That was Dr. Josh using an example of someone else, a Christian apologist position, in contrast to somebody like a non-believer's position.
Yeah, Michael Fredman writes, a loon like Joel, is there a uniqueness of loony that Joel represents instead of other apologists? No, I think as far as other apologists go, that they are their own kind of loon. Because there's loony like in Looney Tunes where you've got something whimsical, or entertaining going on, and then there's apologists who are just loony in a depressing way.
Yeah.
Or an irritating way, where instead they're taking a very long walk around what they want to say. I'm a Christian. I'm better than you. Shut up and do what I tell you.
Mm-hmm.
If they would just be honest about that.
Even better, I know better, and so do you.
No, I know better, and I know you have it in you as well if you just listen to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's take a little break here. Stand up. I'm getting a cramp in my leg. What was I going to bring up? But yeah, shit, completely lost. There was something I was going to say and add to that, but completely lost my fucking train of thought. Damn it. Yeah. So this, but anyway, yeah. So far this conversation is going. It's not quite a fart in a car kind of situation, but it's damn near close. But like I said, I will be showing stuff later on after this that kind of shows that Joel really missed the mark, and I think it's because he really wants to have the presupposition. He doesn't want to do. And what's funny is that he said it earlier in this video that he agrees with Saitem Bergenkate not to have Bible study with non-believers, but he didn't bring that up to. He didn't say that to Dr. Josh.
Yeah,
Unless he's assuming that Dr. Josh heard that, but even if Dr. Josh didn't hear it, or even if he did, why didn't remind him? Well, yeah, that would be getting into and why he didn't understand that Dr. Josh is going at it from a literary / like possibly looking at this from a literary and historical critique, and then how he can just kind of go, yeah, I don't want to have that conversation.
what I don't understand, well, I do understand it, but there has been such a buildup, an accretion of, if I'm using that word correctly, of just crap, pop, evangelical, stupidity in America from all these from a lot of these like really bad mindsets. Like you go back to the words of Dr. James Dobson and like all of his family advice was about treating your wife and your kids like cattle. He was constantly comparing them to livestock. Like you got your gate leaners and your gate crashers. Like you're talking about human children, not cows. If you are trying to educate your kids, you are treating them like their cattle. They will probably buck. Yeah, they're probably gonna. Yeah, they're gonna notice that.
Cows buck, or is that horses?
Horses, but I mean,
It can stay.
Have you ever been stalked by a cow?
Oh yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. You don't want to. I mean, they're nice and gentle most of the time, but if you piss one off, you don't want to be anywhere near it.
Oh, I watched. I was walking. What was it? I was walking Gus. It was when we had Gus, that red nose pit, and we were back up in Michigan from North Carolina, and I was taking him for a walk, and I was taking him down this country road. We were at Bill's house, and I was taking him down this country road, and this person has this land, and he has cows, and those cows did not like that fucking dog at all. They stalked us all down the fence line. And there was like 20 of them, and they all and I stopped, and they all stopped, and they just sat there and stared at that dog. And Gus, being the big oblivious brick that he was, he didn't care. He didn't give a shit.
Dr. Josh is in the live chat.
Oh, hi, Dr. Josh. We're watching you get pwned by Joel.
You want to put the link in there just in case he wants to? He might be driving, but just in case he wants to join in.
Yeah. Can you throw it in?
Yeah, I can do that.
This is my Sunday, and I still have more stuff to do.
Maya's here. So says that I'm nothing but trouble. I think that's fair.
Who, you?
Yeah.
She apparently has not talked to me enough. Nope. Anyway. All right. Let's get back to this here. Did you put the link in for him, or do you need me to do it?
No, I did. I dropped it in
Okay.
there. There's no pressure. He might be busy doing something else or working.
I'm sorry. What did you say? I missed something. I was plugging in my headset.
Oh, nothing.
It's dying, so I have to plug it in to charge it up. Anyhow, here we go. Oh, let me see. What did he say? Jay must be city folk. No, I've been both, right?
Well, kind of. I mean, we weren't raised on a farm. We were just kind of white trashy.
Yeah. Well, we lived in the country in Michigan for several years, and then I lived in the country when I was in North Carolina when we bought our first house. But look who we have here. Oh, it's the infamous Dr. Joshua Bowen.
Ooh, what's up, guys?
Sorry, I can't help it. I do it every once in a while. I was like, Josh Bowen.
You know, I was teaching my Hebrew class last night, and what did I? Oh, I brought up we were doing Exodus 21. Surprise, surprise. And and
Yay.
and I said, okay, so here, look, this is how laws are structured in a lot of these ancient Near Eastern law collections. You have a protasis, and then you have an apodosis. And then I started laughing, and they were looking at me like, "What's wrong with this guy?" And I said, "It's the apodosis." It wasn't. It wasn't in any way clear.
did you make the mistake of saying apoditic at any time?
I did
It's
not.
it's apoditic.
Oh my god.
That's when you call praise an epididymis and see if he goes and looks it up. You're an epididymis.
Anybody who doesn't know what an epididymis is? Anybody here not know what the epididymis is? Anyway.
They're looking it up. Yeah, they'll Google it.
Yep. So anything you want to add other than that, Dr. Josh? I know you just muted, but are we covering this with any kind of like?
I actually just came in about 2 minutes before I came up. I'm baking some cookies. So I only have a couple minutes.
What kind?
You
Chocolate
fucking
chip.
you
Okay.
fucking beta.
Well, I mean,
Baking good cookies is not easy work, man.
I baked the sourdough yesterday, so I gotta do my chocolate chip cookies tonight. So
You know how to make sourdough?
yeah, I've got a couple of starters going. I've had them going for a couple of years.
Oh,
Do you
bravo.
Snizzle.
Do you use a bread maker, or do you just pan in the oven?
No, just I use a Dutch oven. I let it rise in a bowl, and then.
Gotcha.
So I was just gonna say, and then you gotta let them cool. I promise I won't. Just hang on, pal. Oh, I'm on a call. Just hang on. Yeah. I just wanted to say that yeah, I'd be very interested actually in your feedback because in this conversation, I mean, I feel like I'm a nice guy. So I feel like the conversation went reasonably well.
Too nice.
But I I felt like my point. Well, I'll let you tell me what you think my point was, but
Your point's clear. You wanted to talk. Your conversation was more about talking, and maybe I'm wrong, was having a conversation about the Bible from more of a literary and historical stance, not an ethical one.
yeah, that was what was kind of confusing because like the reason this whole thing started, I think I tried to explain it in the stream, but uh I'd never seen anything by Joel before. I mean that I don't think. And uh I remember an atheist came up on one of his call-in shows, and he was there with. That's why I saw him because there was a Wi-Fi somebody with the name Wi-Fi in there, and somebody had done a debate with that guy recently. Anyway, but it was something about the atheist was saying something about I think it was about slavery. It was slavery genocide, and the response was essentially, well, like, how do you know that anything is wrong?
Yeah.
And so I left the comment, it's really interesting to me that when, there are many apologists that when, asked about these difficult textual questions that they go to this sort of presuppositional stuff. And he responded with, we may have to debate this, or I may have to debate you on that, which got me kind of excited because I was like, oh, okay, so we're going to debate the text. That's great. That's not apparently what he meant. And
No.
so
No,
confusion ensued. Because I was like, why are we talking about debating like the
talking
basis of morality or something?
if you're talking about Wi-Fi gospel is not. I actually watched or listened to the debate between Wi-Fi, or that debate. I can't remember who the non-believer was. It was not a good debate at all. He started, like, when cornered, he started doing this, like, how do you know? How do you know? I think that's basically how it went. Like,
And I
well,
mean,
what's your justification? What's your grounding for logic? And
like I suppose that sort of thing can have a place, right? I mean, I'm sure that's an important conversation to have. But I mean, when my critique was, it seems like you're not engaging with the text, and then the response is to not engage with the text.
How
I
dare
was
you?
just it was just confusing. But
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, anyway, I'd be interested to
I,
hear what you guys have to say.
I think the I mean, it seemed pretty clear to me what you were doing as far as like kind of pointing that out. Like, hey, you can call balls and strikes and fouls on this stuff. You can do that. And he's desperately trying to drag you into, like, look, I know what's right and wrong because I'm a Christian. How the hell do you think you know what's right and wrong? And it's like, that's just that lazy precept bullshit, because from
But
their
that's the
perspective,
thing. Like, just like that was, yeah, that wasn't even my point.
right.
That's what's
No,
confusing
it was
about
clear. It
this.
was clear that wasn't that. It's very clear that that wasn't your point. But he was very much trying to make it that point, and you could see that by when you said, well, you gave him the example of, if an atheist says, well, Exodus 21, when it talks about beating your slave,
Right.
this is an open claim to, like, basically saying, yeah, you can just beat your slaves, every live long day kind of thing. And then you
Right.
said, no, that's not what the text says. And then you gave kind of the other side of the debate, where it was somebody saying, it was like a Christian apologist saying, well, this is an improvement
Right.
upon the stipulation, like what he said earlier when he said, well, slavery is a set of stipulations given by God that regulate a system of slavery that had been around, far earlier, right?
Oh,
And
so
then
he did say that.
yeah, so he
Oh,
didn't
okay.
say it was an improvement per se, but it's insinuated because he's saying that God basically put these stipulations in place to regulate slavery in this particular culture, in order for it to later on down in I think he used the term more modern times, to eventually ban it. The problem
Okay.
the problem with that is that he seemed to be almost like or almost implying that no other ancient Near East culture gave regulations on slavery, which
Or at least,
clearly is,
yeah.
and it's like,
Yeah.
no, they clearly did, and that would be Dr. Josh's wheelhouse right there, because he would point to, like, the laws of Ernamu, uh, the Code of Hammurabi, where they actually we have these things written out that talk about, okay, you can have a slave for 3 years, you release them after 3. There's these things if one escapes, or if somebody gets one, there's all these regulations and stipulations that are put in place by these other ancient Near East cultures. So he apparently just wanted to just kind of like blow by that. And then when you gave the example about improving, he took that and then latched on, well, now you're doing something axiological here, like by saying that there's an improvement here, but that wasn't your claim. Your claim was about what you were giving him was an example about a Christian apologist saying
It's an
this, like,
improvement.
this is an improvement, not that you're saying it's an improvement.
Right.
But he went there instead, and that, when I heard that, I was like, that's where his active listening is fucking failing him, because he's latching onto you saying something about someone else saying an improvement, and he's now thinking it's you saying it's an
I see.
improvement.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's not what you were doing at all. And it's not until later, spoiler alert, it's not until later to where it actually, I think it kind of dawns on him when you do it again that you go, oh, he kind of goes, oh, okay. But he doesn't backpedal. He doesn't go, oh, wait, then I was completely wrong. You're not doing anything axiological. You're just talking about, instead of saying, oh, you just want to have a conversation about the literary and historical context of these particular scriptures, how we're reading them and how we're making judgments about them. He doesn't do that. He instead goes to this, well, I want to have a conversation about the ethics. I want to go into those meta ethics. And he thinks
Yeah,
that's more important, is to basically get to what you think ethically
I
about
have,
these things,
I
and
have a,
then
I have, a,
figure
I have,
out how we can now differentiate who's right and who's wrong under your atheist worldview, and how I'm right under my Christian worldview. That's how I'm taking it. But go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
yeah. There's another thing too that like Joel reminds me that he uses the term a lot, but he likes throwing out the word meta ethics. If you study meta ethics even for a little bit, and I tried, it's boring as hell. It raises a lot more questions than it answers, and that's on purpose. That's kind of how it is. The weird thing about apologists like Joel, they're running around like they've got the solution to meta ethics. It's the Bible, and that demonstrates a lack of understanding of the Bible and of metaethics. Because if you had even just kind of a basic appreciation for what you're doing when you're studying metaethics, you would not make a claim that crazy. But he does.
and I think that, and I'll say these two things, and I'm gonna have to drop down because I think I'm gonna have to try to sneak out and help Megan with the kids. But um, yeah, did I get to the part about the Hebrew word king?
No, we're not there. We're not there yet. The goat
Okay.
king comparison. No, we're not there
Yeah,
yet.
because that's one thing that I'd be interested to hear when you guys get to it, if you think that was a good analogy. Um, but the other thing that I was trying to drive home in this, and by the way, thank you guys for letting me come up at short notice like that.
Sure.
Well, it's either
Is
you can, Dr. Josh, you put us in the acknowledgments of one of your books. So as far as I'm concerned, you could come up here, call us all sorts of bad names, and then say, you guys can't justify bullshit. Sam! Just kidding.
your ultimacy of preconditionals. No, I get it. But I think if 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 the point of the apologist is to say, um, in order to have a conversation with me, you have to adopt the entirety of my worldview, right? I mean, that no longer becomes like useful or interesting,
Right.
right? Because in that worldview, there are no contradictions in the text, right? There is nothing that God does that's immoral. And if somebody's just going to say, like, I'm coming to the text with that presupposition, hey, like, live your best life. I don't think that's a wise move, but that's not my field.
Yeah.
Um,
It seems like the theological equivalent of saying like we never negotiate with terrorists. And it's like, okay, question: how do you expect to talk them out of doing something terrible then? Like,
yeah.
you might
And,
want to keep communication channels open.
but like, so if I come to Genesis 2 and the question gets asked, like, isn't it a contradiction that animals get created after man as opposed to before, right? If
Yeah.
I'm adopting that evangelical, hermeneutic, no, of course it's not. There can't be a contradiction. And so then it's like, well, how do you explain it? Well, even if I can't, it doesn't matter because I know that there's no contradiction, right? So I just wait for further evidence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but that's like, I guess that has its own place, but like I have no problem with that if you're saying, yeah, I can't explain this and I can't explain that, I can't explain this, but I just have faith because of my position that it's true. Well, okay. I mean, that's great.
Yeah.
But I think that was sort of the point that I was trying to make.
Yeah.
But anyway. Guys, let me drop down. Sorry for doing this drive by here, but
No, it's
thank
fine.
you for having me up. I really
No,
appreciate it.
I was hoping you'd come in. This is great.
Yeah,
Thanks, Dr. Josh.
enjoy those cookies. I want one now.
I'll keep it on speaker so I can listen.
Maybe not. I do have a tendency to throw out some bad language, but
I'll just make sure that I don't let them hear the apodosis. So yeah,
I just
guys,
don't want
have
you,
fun.
I don't want your kids running around learning
Right.
things from Jay.
Understood.
Yeah,
I'll keep
gotcha.
you in my ear then.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
See you
Bye.
guys.
See ya.
I'll try to keep it PG. I'll try to keep it. No, you can't even keep it PG with kids sometimes. I watched the other night. We got a 4K copy of Back to the Future. There is a lot of swearing in that movie.
Yeah, there was.
All
I
right.
saw Sinners earlier this week, and that is a great movie.
Really?
Oh God, it's fantastic. Yeah, I want to see it again. The only bad thing is I can't. I saw a thing where Coogler was explaining the IMAX, the large. He used multi formats, so it's and I thought there was something up with it because it's not available in IMAX around here. You can only see it in just regular screens. But there was like these really thick black bars on the screen, and I was like, why does it look like this thing's being played out of a DVD player or something like that? But they changed, and I'm like, oh, this has like a variable aspect ratio in it. And yeah, I kind of missed the fact that I didn't catch it. I don't think it was in IMAX around here for very long, unfortunately. But I wish I had seen it that way. Yeah, music in it is fantastic. Is
it a musical? I'm sorry, folks. We're getting on a side topic here, but that's fine.
It's not a musical. It has musical moments in it. I mean, it's about a juke joint that gets attacked by vampires. So, vampires that are attracted to good music.
Vampires that are attracted to good music.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, one in particular, but I don't want to give anything more away.
Yeah, don't give anything away. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Anyway, back to the show. Yeah, so the thing about the goat, the goat analogy that Dr. Josh was referring to earlier, that's coming up here shortly. You're sitting on my power cord, Maddie. All right, here we go.
The word improve, for example. The word improve assumes that there's a standard of well-being or a standard of what's acceptable for societies to practice. Someone could make the argument that any law code.
I really don't know why he even bothered to do this, but it was, like I said, it was not
he's grasping on it because he wants to.
Yeah, it wasn't Dr. Josh
making a value claim, and then he's going to say you can't make value claims
because blah blah blah. Yep.
Yeah.
That is given by the Lord that helps people to know Him better, as opposed to being lost in idolatry or atheism.
To know Him better. Know Him better how? That's an interesting. I didn't catch that before.
You get very different personalities about God in the various books of the Bible.
Yeah.
So
I especially like the one I like the God from Genesis 18 showing up with the two angels that are going to go down and turn Sodom and Gomorrah into a parking lot. They show at Abraham's tent. He's very amicable. He's very hospitable to them, offers them food and everything. And then those two guys, they go down to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and God and Abraham are looking over. They're looking at the valley and they're looking at Sodom and Gomorrah, and then they start talking about if there's so many righteous people, are you going to destroy all of those people, even the righteous ones that live there? That's a great, somebody who actually asked, what's your favorite obscure story in the Bible? And that's probably one of I don't think it's my most favorite obscure story, but it definitely ranks up there. It's a hilarious narrative.
My two favorites, where you get a really unique take on him, is the one where he decides just to go murder Moses because he's pissed at him.
Yeah.
And then gets thrown off because
foreskin.
Yeah, Moses throws their baby boy's foreskin at him. And
was it Moses or was it Moses' wife?
It was Zipporah, Moses' wife. She.
But
the
wasn't
one-
it? But wasn't it like an on the spot? Like, isn't in the narrative like it was an on the spot circumcision? Like she just like cut it and then threw it.
She just does it
She
in the
does it.
end.
Yeah, she
And
takes
it's
a knife and cuts the kid's
and it
foreskin off,
shows
and then
up after
fresh.
he's been told to go set the Israelites free in Egypt, and then it goes, and then there's just this weird, deleted for it should have been deleted for for editing, because it was just like, okay, and then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he went to the inn to kill him. Like, excuse me. You just sent him on a mission. Like, what is he doing? Like, what happened? Clearly there's something missing in between here. Apparently it's like an old folk tale that scholars think that they just kind of shoehorned in.
What is kind of funny is when you watch this. So going back to this video, when you see on the call Dr. Joshua Bowen, this changes a little bit. So earlier it was just on the call Dr. Joshua Bowen, and then as soon as he said he was atheist, he goes, comma, atheist. They had to add it. I'm like, why?
That's a viewer discretion advised for other Christians.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Oh, no, he's talking to one of them.
It's like, no, he's gonna vote.
I'm surprised he doesn't just like concoct an image of Dr. Josh Bowen with like blue flame shooting out of his mouth, like Spring Hill Jack or something like that, and leaping from rooftop to rooftop, preying on the public. Well,
with that rainbow colored bow tie just spinning like a propeller.
Well, it's rainbow. It's Pride affiliated, so
yeah.
There's all cavalry associated.
Yeah,
with
you
that.
throw holy water on that, it's fucking going. It's steaming. Yeah,
I bet there's. I bet they live in an area where they have kitty litters in the public school bathrooms. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for the furries. Yep.
Yeah.
Gotta have kitty litter for the furries. When I hadn't heard about that, but when I did hear about it from my wife, I stopped. When she mentioned it, I was going somewhere in the house and I literally stopped in my tracks and went, "What did you say?" And then she explained to me, like, for the furries. And she goes, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, okay, whatever." And then it just kept going. I was like, wow.
Yep.
Paganness would definitionally be an improvement. Now, you might say, "Oh, well, no, that's just I don't believe that. I think that atheism would be an improvement. Any law code that pushes people towards atheism." But now we're getting into axiology and we're getting into metaphysics, and we've entered.
He didn't get into axiology, and he's not getting into metaethics.
Joel's doing that because he's desperate.
You're doing that. You're just feeding that into. Your active listening just seems to be an active way of just like stacking on bullshit to something that somebody did not actually say in any way, shape, or form whatsoever.
The world of philosophy. So, I'm.
Don't go there.
Well, real quick. So my point is that
yes,
if he
doesn't go there. It's exactly what Dr. Josh was trying to explain before, and you fucking took it there because he gave you an example about someone saying X is an improvement, and you went, "See, now you're making an axiological claim." He didn't make it. You dipshit. Sorry, children.
To arbitrarily wall off certain questions from the discourse. By
the way, I'm getting really okay.
Hang on, I got to say this real quick. I do not want to hear from a precept apologist who has said in just this video he doesn't do Bible studies with non-believers, and that certain people can't make these kinds of value judgments from quote unquote their worldview, and then talk about how we're walling ourselves off. That is a stunning level of a lack of self-awareness that I haven't. I mean, I believed him capable of it. I didn't think he would actually demonstrate it in just this short period of time. That was crazy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is a good point from AJ Heeb. Joel doesn't even believe in meta-ethics. In Joel's worldview, there is ethics, what the Bible says, and that's it. There is no meta.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty fair evaluation of it.
I would say that. Yeah, I would say that's definitely spot on there, AJ.
Because the only meta thing, is just like what's foundational to it. Where does it come from? What's it grounded in? What undergirds that? God. Oh, okay, got it fixed, huh?
Mhm.
Sure, settled that problem. No reason to ask any more questions in metaethics now. Didn't realize it was just that easy.
Attempting to do, and I hope that you can see this, and maybe you'd say, maybe I misunderstand you, Josh. I don't want to.
You
I
did
truly,
misunderstand him because your active listening isn't working. And by the way, because I just did it, you see how his mouth is open again? If you go to his channel, if you go to the Think Institute and you look at some of the videos where there's no thumbnails, you will find about 80% of them, if they have a picture of his face paused, about 80% of them have him with his mouth fucking open. I am not joking.
He's drawing breath in through his mouth to keep the mustache cool.
Yes.
That thing looks like it could overheat.
Is that an air cooler? That's an air cooler, right? That's an
No.
air cooler for his motor mouth.
And no, that's insulation. And look at that thing. That's a
Please don't.
pretty
I'm not-
impressive.
Oh, dude, there's a video that I found from like a year ago. He's got like he's got a clear like deviation of his mustache between his septum. It looks completely uneven. It's just ratty as shit. I was like, Jesus Christ. And he's got like his hair's grown out on top. Looks like he's got this fop thing going. Looks like he could have turned it into like one of those like snorkel cones, cones or something. I was like, yeah! It came up on my feed, and when I saw it, I was like, Jesus Christ.
I appreciate you coming on here. But what you're attempting to do is you're attempting to
Now,
examine
here comes the mind reading.
a text that is definitionally moral, that definitionally ties to questions of metaphysics and epistemology, and you're trying to say, let's not talk about any of that stuff.
There is no meta if it's arbitrary, if the ethics in it are arbitrarily declared by an entity. There's nothing to actually declare. There's nothing to debate about where we get these ethics from or why we think this is why some oughts are good oughts and why some oughts, why we ought do something and why we ought not do other things and why we get into deontology. Your position is this is all solid from God. So shut the fuck up.
Well, notice what he's doing too. He's making the assertion that the Bible, from beginning to end, is
moral.
Is a text of moral guidance, and it's like that would be making it univocal, and it would be making it all one genre, and they're not. Those books cover a wide range of things.
Yep.
So yeah, the worst thing about listening to a fundamentalist talk about the Bible is having to listen to them think that it's the end-all be-all of written literature and not have any common sense or real natural respect for what it actually is.
Yep.
Let's
Yes, I
ignore
disagree
that.
with you on that. I
Let's
disagree with you on
or
that.
real quick. I let you talk for a long time. Let's
Yeah, you let him explain himself, and then you went on a gaslighting spree, Joel. He just said he disagreed with you, and then you said, "Oh, well, I let you talk for a long time." So that means to tell me that you're shutting off you're basically asserting that you're right about your assumption as to where Dr. Josh was going. You just gaslit him. I get this is your channel, but this is horribly dishonest. Maybe just disingenuous. Either way, that's bad. He didn't say anything about there's an axiological.
By what standard can you say it's bad, Jay? Come on now. You're just an atheist.
I know a bad car salesman when I see one.
By what standard? No, sorry.
By the standard of experiencing other bad car salesmen. And he can't even, and the thing is that I already own the car that he's telling me that I own, and he still can't sell it to me.
ignore that. Let's just look at the text as it stands. But Josh, all of those judgments are going on.
Well, wait. So you're saying that the statements stand as they are so that interpretive lenses don't ever come into play when it comes to these particular things. Interesting.
In the background. They're going on in the background. So even the fact that you view some topics as off limits, and if I understand correctly, it's because they're so morally repugnant to you.
He did say that they were off limits. He said he doesn't engage in them because he doesn't deal in ethical philosophy. He even granted that if he dealt in ethical philosophy, then it might be something that he would probably talk about and he'd have to try to reconcile. But that's not his field. And he didn't say that he wasn't talking about the moral the moral problems of these issues. It was just, how do you read them? How do we interpret them? How do we understand them? That's it. It's not difficult, Joel. There's no hidden ambiguity. There's no ambiguity in what Dr. Josh is saying. You seem to take it as that, but that's because you weren't listening. He gave you examples, and you took those examples as his claims. That's on you. And then you started to gaslight because you thought that he was making a judgment claim, or by insinuating a judgment claim by bringing up improvement, when he was using improvement based on somebody else using the term improvement. That's ugh.
You won't even address them or validate them being
Yeah, judge that as a moral claim, motherfuckers. Ugh.
That is a moral philosophical statement. That's, you're dealing with metaethics, and you're saying
He didn't make their ethical claim that something is an improvement.
Yeah, he didn't. But anyway, let him go on. Let's see where
Yeah.
he.
the only way that I'll
Land.
discuss this issue at all is if we all grant my preconceived notions about these things, which maybe they're arbitrary, maybe they're not. Maybe you think that they're well grounded.
That's a long list, dude. Your preconceived notions, that requires us to go through a litany of questions to get to what you think your preconceived notions are of these things. Do you think that everyone knows what your preconceived notions are? Are you sure you want to do that? Because that puts you in the position of someone else running a Socratic method on you, where you can't twist it back on them to do the Socratic method on them. No one knows your preconceived notions.
And why would you have? Why would you have to do this?
I don't know, because he thinks that you have to know how a car works in order to drive a car. He thinks that you have to know the maker of a car in order to even buy the car. That's essentially his problem. It's the problem with all presuppositionalists. You're using logic. What do you ground logic in? I don't know. Well, I ground it in God. I know it comes from God. I don't know where it comes from, but you use it, right? Yeah, it seems to work. Yeah, then you should know where it comes from, right? No. Well, don't you know where your car comes from? Came from a factory. Do you know who designed it? No. Then how do you drive your car? I get in it, I fucking put the key in and turn on the ignition.
You still have to put the key in. Oh, charming.
No, I don't. I have a push button start. I was just trying to go with a more generalized one.
All right. Well, let's play this thing. Let's see where he's gonna.
Yeah.
But we have to be willing to pull the floorboards up and see what the foundation is. If we can't do that, we can't have a debate.
Yeah, so you're making, I think, a few determinations here that I don't think are necessarily
I
grounded.
apologize. Like
No,
what?
no, you're good. So, like, let me ask you this: do you think that the Enuma Elish?
Yeah, and that's the thing, Joel. You may not have had to apologize if you hadn't have gone on that fucking scree. If you hadn't have done that, you may not have had to apologize. You may have wanted to ask questions.
What's Dr. Josh's Enuma Elish question?
Yeah, right here. It's the goat.
Is fundamentally
this-
moral, has morality going on in the background, and that we can't discuss it at a literary level?
Notice what he said, on a literary level, not a meta-ethical one, on a literary level.
Or like the Epic of Gilgamesh, or
Yeah,
Odyssey,
I mean,
or,
there's definitely moral. Okay, I see what you're saying. What you're saying is you want to just discuss it as literature. Is that fair?
No, what I think what I'm saying is that there are interpretive frameworks that people come to text with, right? Like they come to anything with, and I know that's what you're saying.
Yes. Well, okay, go on. I think I spotted perhaps a false analogy in bringing up the Enuma Elish or the Epic of Gilgamesh. The reason I think it's a false analogy, Josh, is because neither you nor I are Gilgameshian. We're not ancient
right.
Babylonian
That
pagans.
does not.
That's precisely the point.
Why
One person's sacred text is another person's relic.
And so why is it we're not Israelites? So why do we take the Old Testament seriously?
Because it's the same God. That's what he would say. It's about the same God.
But culturally, the Old Testament is Israelite.
Sure, but he's actually trying. He's actively missing the point that Josh is trying to make. Josh, like, those books, like the Enuma Elish and these other ancient Near Eastern things, contain moral proclamations.
Yeah.
At the very least, ethical proclamations. Ones involving, like, a kind of at least hoped for legal good or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't see them as intrinsically morally instructive to us as individuals, because those are relics of a bygone place in a bygone time. But because the Bible has been carried on, and the interpretive framework for that Joel uses is that it is a single narrative from Genesis to Revelation that you read and then do what it says. That's why it has meaning. Like, you could apply that to nearly any book.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I am a Christian. You are an atheist. And so we both have skin in the game when it comes to whether or not the morality of the Bible is true and whether or not God is really there.
Okay,
No.
You might have skin in that game. A person not convinced does not have any skin in the game at all.
Actually, if anything, if a non-believer can approach aspects of the Bible and identify, especially if they're a scholar, right? And there are believers who are scholars that approach different books of the Bible and can identify places where, like, that morality does not hold up. There are characters, or there are things being described, there are acts being taken that are not moral. For instance, when the griping of the Israelites about not having a variety of things to eat, not having enough meat, right? One of the things, in order to keep kosher, you will not eat dead animals, like ones that you find. Obviously,
no
scavenging.
Scavenging roadkill.
Yeah, no roadkill, right?
I know you love this. This is probably your favorite. I would say that this is probably your favorite obscure narrative.
Yeah, because God gets pissed off that they're griping about this, so he sends a foul wind that strikes down a bunch of birds, and they go landing across the ground. And he does this knowing that they're desperate enough for some meat. They're going to snatch all those corpses up and then eat them. It makes them sick, and many die. And God is laughing his ass off about it.
Yeah.
So it's like, if I'm reading this, like, not books, but just the story that is the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, what do we say about that character's arc right there?
Yeah.
There's nothing morally just like, well, he's powerful, he can do whatever he wants. So it's might makes right. That's your ethic?
Yep. Here we go.
So I think that you do. I don't think that I do, any more than you have skin in the game. If someone were an ancient Mesopotamian, Enlil worshiper.
I have skin in that game.
I don't know.
I guess maybe if you're saying that your religious position about the divinity of Yahweh or something is being matched up against, then yes, I suppose that's the case. But I wouldn't, right?
Well, I'm not so sure about that, respectfully. Why do you say that you wouldn't?
Because it doesn't make any difference to me.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any difference to you whether or not your atheism is true?
No.
So can you explain why that is? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I find that shocking.
Sure. So I'm not an atheist apologist, right? Or I'm not an anti-theist or something, right? Like when people ask me if I'm an atheist, it's like, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a God, but I mean, it doesn't really matter to me. Like if there was one, it's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Respectfully, Josh, I'm sorry for laughing. I say this very, I don't know that you fully teased out the implications of your atheism or what it would mean if it was not true. If the God of the Bible really is there, which he is.
Well, that's a different question.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it is a different question. I think it's
what I'm saying is if a God exists.
I'm right, but yeah, I mean, we
I
can talk
realize
about
from your interpretive framework, if that God exists, there is only one God, right? I get that. But what I'm saying is that's not the statement that I'm making.
Yes, I understand that, but I'm also not interested in defending when we already talked about how if both of us were debating worldviews that we didn't care about, we didn't adhere to, yeah, we'd have less skin in the game. But because we're dealing with worldviews, directly, this is like more of a this is more of a direct challenge. I mean, I'm directly challenging your atheistic presuppositions. And what I'm saying, real quick, let me at least finish my sentence. There was a comma there, not a period. I'm directly challenging your atheistic presuppositions because by my lights, and I think this is correct, I could be wrong, but I don't think so. it seems like you're coming to the text of Scripture as if the existence of the Lord in reality is irrelevant to your interpretation. And
You can do that.
Yeah, you can do that.
You
Why?
can you can suspend that disbelief as a believer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is he going to try to say that there's something about being a Christian that makes you cognitively impossible for you to achieve something that we can do?
Cognitively,
I've watched believers who are ordained and who are professors do exactly what he's talking about, and they are regular churchgoers. They believe in Jesus.
Yep.
This is just fundamentally incorrect.
Yep.
that is a major assumption. That's a challenge I need to bring. It's absolutely not relevant. And I think that that's coming out more and more as we're talking.
Yeah, so I'm approaching ancient texts in the same way across the board.
Go
So
on.
let me ask it this way. If we were talking and you said, I think the Hebrew word melech means goat, right? And I said, well, I mean, it doesn't mean goat, right? It means king. Would I have to, in order to engage with that, like here in this passage in 1 Samuel, look, the word melech, let me show you 17 different places where it occurs in passages, and here it clearly, the lexicography shows that it means king.
Okay.
Would we have to engage in a conversation about morality for me to talk to you about the lexical meaning of the word melech?
No, I don't think so. But it seems like an irrelevant thesis.
Okay, well,
But that's not irrelevant.
Because
It's
that goes
relevant.
back to what he was talking about before. Like, if I'm watching a debate between a believer and a non-believer, and each one makes incorrect claims about what supposedly the text says, he's not making a value judgment. He's basically just raising his hand and saying, "That's not what that does.
Yeah.
It does not say that. You misunderstand the text, or you're running in a different
And we're looking at the rules. Yeah, and we're looking at like the rules of language, that kind of thing. We're kind of looking like the way this was structured, the way this was formulated in the ancient Hebrew, the way it's interpreted, and how they came to this. Yeah, contextually.
But this raises a significant problem with the precept apologetic when these apologists start to internalize it this way, because if Joel believes, right, that even though there's only one worldview possible, that there are two worldviews competing, the Christian worldview and then the non-one, whatever that fucking means, right, the atheist worldview. What Josh just did defies Joel's understanding of precept, because Josh just spoke something that was true. He used his logic and his reason to say, hey, this is something that I could do. Hypothetically, we're having a situation. You're under the impression that this Hebrew word means goat. It actually means king. I can bring receipts and show you why that's true. And when asked, Joel says, oh, well, no, I wouldn't have a problem with that, but I think that's irrelevant. Okay, so you've just conceded that you can accept that Josh knows things and that he can speak the truth about things.
Yeah.
Okay, so the jig is up. I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
Because these guys cannot be consistent. Like, to what degree should I expect my faculties to fail relative to my denial of the existence of the Christian God? Because it sounds like
they don't. Yeah, they don't. Yeah, they don't.
I should just descend into the reason that Van Til is like, no, the reason that we all make sense, the reason that we have these things is because we're all part of the Christian worldview. And Joel's trying to do this thing where they have it both ways. Well,
Like
yeah,
a lot of preceptors. Yeah.
you think, I think, therefore God. That's how it works. Like, okay, then what the fuck are you doing obsessing over how I reached these conclusions? We are in the same reality.
Yeah.
If your God is true, and I have the capacity to doubt it, that's not up to me.
You need
to raise that with God.
Yeah, the only difference is that you're saying that you know the source of that epistemic modality, and I don't, even though we're both stuck using that same epistemic modality.
And even if you knew that, it wouldn't change any of the limitations that you have within it.
Or well, I should say modality that comes to that same epistemic conclusion, epistemic position. Either way, yeah, it's It's
Yeah. What if we found out that it was actually like the human consciousness is somehow related to quantum field states, and actually our ethics and morals and some of these drives are actually interconnected in some kind of weird quantum fields or something like that. So we know that. Cool. That doesn't change the fact that I can be fooled, that I can tell lies, that I can believe stupid things, that I can know things to be true, and that I can repeat facts. All those things were still possible with. Knowing the foundation of it, knowing the source would not change the fact that I can still fuck it up.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, these guys are trying to say, like, well, no, actually, if you think about it, though, if you do know the source and we can be certain of these things, like, that does not make you right all the time.
Yep.
That just gives you a feeling. And it's based on you misunderstanding lots of shit in a lot of different books in the Bible.
Yep. Now let's get through this. This doesn't go on much longer, but we're going to try to get through this, and then I will get to the where this became a problem when they decided to take this particular conversation between him and Dr. Josh and made it into a separate video.
Let me finish it out then.
Go ahead.
So what I'm saying is when you make statements like, the slavery in the laws of the Hebrew Bible, regulates in a way that the other nations didn't, right?
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
See, now
You're saying, no, that's factually inaccurate.
Yeah, that's like a historical question, right?
Okay,
That's a looking at the text question.
I see. Okay. And so if let's say that's
so now instead of realizing that when he did that whole little thing before, where he went on this whole like, oh, there's this axiological thing that you're implying. Now he realizes that's not the case. That's how I'm taking it. But he's not going to backpedal on that and go, oh, then I was completely wrong for doing that. That's why I said earlier, Joel is running his mouth because his active listening just went completely off the chain. Instead of asking questions to clarify, he just went to an assumption and then thought he was right by doing that.
The case. And for the sake of argument, I'll grant that. The more interesting conversation to me
For the sake of argument, you'll grant it? You just said he was right.
That doesn't make any sense.
If you're saying he's right,
what do you grant for the sake of argument?
Why are you granting it for the sake of argument? Granting it for the sake of argument doesn't mean it kind of negates your position that he was right. Let me take that back.
Hebrew Bible, regulates in a way that the other nations didn't, right?
I see what you're saying. Yeah. You're saying, no, that's factually inaccurate.
Yeah, that's like a historical question, right?
Okay,
that's looking at the text question.
I see. Okay. And so if let's say that's the case, and for the sake of argument, I'll grant that. The more interesting conversation.
Okay, never mind. He didn't say he was right. Okay, my mistake. But
what I still don't understand. What does he need to suspend judgment on?
Can he?
I'm just trying to figure, like, let's say that's the case. I'll assume what? That he's right about it, or that people can do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, keep playing.
Is the Old Testament law code moral or immoral? And for me, I'm going to view that in light of all of Scripture.
He's not talking about whether or not it's moral or immoral. He's talking about it in the way that we interpret it.
No, he was talking about a claim was made that slavery in the Old Testament is an improvement compared to the other cultures around them and their law codes, and that is inaccurate.
Yeah, exactly.
He's making the value judgment that biblical slavery, the slavery of ancient Israel, was a better system than anything around it.
Well, he didn't say that. He seemed to insinuate it as a way of like, God put a stipulation on and regulated slavery, which seems to insinuate that no other nation did regulate slavery. But the goal of that is that because eventually it was going to end up being the abolition or the abolishment of slavery, because there is this innate dignity to humanity.
Well, but not only that, but like if anything established by God is by definition good, then slavery's good.
That too, yeah.
It's just that simple. So now he's trying to do this. He's still trying to do this thing where it's like, well, what we're going to have to do is get into this conversation about what you're bringing up is whether or not, the system is moral or immoral versus another system. Like, I don't think if anybody was making a moral argument about slavery, Joel or Josh already admitted, like, I start from the perception, from the position that owning people is bad. And he said he didn't have any trouble sleeping at night because of that, right? He doesn't have to be an ethical, an ethicist or a moral philosopher to get that, right? That's where he starts. So if you're going to try let's talk about the morality of these systems, I'm pretty sure you could have gleaned from the conversation that if Dr. Josh was asked, are any of these systems of ancient slavery morally good? He would say no. But that's not the claim that was brought up as being one being contested. It was whether or not the one ordained by Yahweh for the Israelites is somehow an improvement compared to other ancient Near Eastern systems of slavery.
Yeah, and based on what we have examples of in history, no, it's on par.
Yeah, some slaves had more protections. They had shorter.
I think Dr. Josh says it's pretty much on par, even though some may have been better in certain situations, but for the most part, it's all pretty much right down.
But at the end of the day, they're the ones making the ludicrous claim. Oh, it's an improvement.
Well, there's also the problem.
Slavery.
Yeah, and the other problem is that under the Old Testament, like someone like Dr. Josh and even I think it's Westbrook and many other biblical scholars have said that they don't hold to the Old Testament as being any kind of normative legislation. So we don't actually know from a historical standpoint that they actually, what's written in the Old Testament was actually something that they actually followed, right? This is an example, like Dan McClellan said in one of his videos, that there were actually laws written in Louisiana for the proper treatment of slaves. Did they follow them? No. It doesn't seem like historically that they did, given the harsh conditions that some slaves had to actually endure while being owned by these plantation owners in the antebellum South, right? So just because you have a narrative or you have these particular things they're talking about the proper treatment of slaves, historically speaking, whether or not they actually followed that, that's a whole other topic.
Right, but I mean, the thing that what he's dealing with, or what Joel's trying to do right now, is he's still trying to drag Josh into a conversation where they're going to compare these things to find out which one's more moral than the other, and and he still doesn't understand. Like, do you understand
how Dr. Josh can justify that morality, or how he can make a claim about it being morally wrong if he doesn't first grant that God is the foundation for his moral reasoning.
Right, which you wouldn't want to do if it's going to lead you down this trap, because this guy is saying that even if it were correct, let's say that it was absolutely correct to say, actually, if you look at all of the neighboring ancient Near Eastern cultures, the Israelites had a much gentler system of slavery. Cool, still slavery.
Yeah, it's still ownership.
Yeah, you're talking about kinder, gentler forms of crime.
Yeah, it's like the example that I brought up in conversations that I've had. It's like nothing about being property. Like, just because I own my car, people go, oh, well, you own that as property, so you beat the shit out of it. You treat it like shit. It's like nothing says that because I own something as property means that I'm going to treat it badly. I own my car, and under the laws here in the United States, I own my cat. I own my dog. Do I treat my dog and my cat like pieces of shit because they're property? No. Right? Just like I take care of my car. I don't treat my car like crap. I don't.
That's not the point. The point of the institution of slavery is that it turns a person into a thing.
That was exactly my point. Yeah, it's just that it relegates a human being from being an autonomous individual and puts them into the same category as any other kind of owned property, to where it could be the case that they could be abused in that way, right? Just because I'm not going to do it doesn't mean that it can't happen now, and it
doesn't make it any less dehumanizing.
Exactly. Yep.
Do that in light of Paul's admonitions
or undignified. Unless he thinks that people being considered as property is in some way dignified.
I've heard them try to say that, like, well, it's better that they be an indentured servant or a slave rather than being a beggar on the street. At least they're working. That's
Ew.
an apologetic. Yep.
Yeah.
Philemon. I'm gonna view that in light of statements that Jesus Christ says about if the Son has set you free, you are free indeed. Paul saying, don't submit yourselves again to a yoke of slavery. So
You mean the yoke of slavery being the old law, not necessarily the institution of slavery. Like that's a rhetoric. That's not necessarily akin to the actual system of slavery.
the conversation, the only reason that you and I would have a debate about this is if one of us believes that the God of the Bible is somehow immoral or not the standard of morality.
I would definitely argue that it is immoral. And that even if it does exist, I would be like, no. And this is the other thing that I always get back to is that it's like, why, in my opinion, I brought this up on it was over at Captive Desk and Mike's the Answers in Atheism. They were doing a live stream. And I said, in my opinion, it's really kind of funny because they seem to think like, well, instead of just being an open rebellion, you're doing this kind of weird gaslighting thing to yourself where you're deluding yourself into believing something to not be the case so that you can just continue justifying your own righteousness. I'm like, why bother? In my opinion, it would be better to know it, right? I know it. Cool. All right, so you should follow it. No. It can do whatever the fuck it wants to do. I'm staying away from it. I'm not worshiping it. I'm not having anything to do with it. Well, why not? Because if you're saying that God actually exists, and based on these particular texts from the Bible, which we now have to say are 100% true in light that basically declare or tell us exactly what its character is, there's no fucking way. I want it to leave me the fuck alone.
Nitty says, Philemon had no agencies. If you're free indeed, that phrase is not related to slavery by men. It's slavery to sin, you illiterate doofus.
Yeah, thank you, Nitty.
He really can't read his Bible.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's one of the things where people will be like, well, we'll just consider the evolution of slavery in terms of like what happens in Philemon. Yeah, what happens in Philemon, right? Like Philemon doesn't really have any agency to go anywhere. Paul's talking to his owner about whether or not this slave should be free or not.
Yep.
You know who they probably should ask? Philemon. Yeah.
One thinks that that's not the case. And I'm going to want to have that moral meta-reasoning conversation about what is required in order to make axiological judgments, especially when it comes to ethics and moral absolutes. So if that's not a conversation...
What is required, it's already being done. You don't have to know where it comes from to do it, Joel. You're already declaring that it automatically happens because human beings know things because God is the thing that is the necessary precondition for people knowing things. You don't have to know have to know where that comes from in order to do it. There's nothing about knowing the ontology of something or knowing the very thing that something is, where something actually came from in order to work with it or to use it. So this is complete horseshit. It's like what I said before. I don't know the person that designed my car, whoever drew up the concept for my car. I don't know the person that invented I don't know all the people that invented the systems that go into what of my car, right? There's a person that actually came up with the automatic intermittent wiper system. I don't remember who that person is. They made a movie about him, starring Greg Kinnear. Don't know his name. But I don't need to know that person to know how to use that fucking system in that car. So I don't know what it is that you're trying to fucking do. There's no bearing on the utility of something and having to know where that thing came from in order to implement its utility. That does not make any sense. It never has made any sense to me in any way, shape, or form.
Conversation you're willing to have because you don't think it's in any way relevant to like your field of study, or you don't think that you could and I don't mean this as an insult, but you don't think you can like hold your own in that debate. That's fine. But that is the conversation as far as I can see. I mean, I'm a Christian apologist. I'm interested in vindicating the truth of the Christian worldview.
So if I could pause you for a second, because so let me see if I can say this in a way that sort of sums all of that up. and I was actually saying this to Kip the other day.
I've got 2 minutes, by the way.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll be quick. So, like, I have no problem ever with a Christian apologist saying, look, as you just said, I read Leviticus 25, 44 to 46 in light of Jesus, right? Or my understanding of the Jesus figure and how he's said in the Pauline epistles and the Gospels, right? And so I understand Leviticus
Yeah, the
25
Jesus
to be a
figure.
positive thing, right? And then it's like, okay, that's cool, right? Like, I don't have any problem with that. The problem that I have is when, if someone, an apologist, goes back to Leviticus 25 and says, this word property actually just means X. Now you've stepped into my field. Now we're talking about something other than your interpretive framework. Now we're talking about lexicography, right, or historiography.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. If you truly feel like you've got no skin in the game, which I don't grant this, but if this is
That is the skin of his. That is his game. That's the skin of it. That's the game he's talking about. He doesn't have any skin in the game when it comes to atheism, Joel. He just gave you where his game is. The game is in the interpretive, is in the way that we interpret these particular things. And you just completely blew by it. Dr. Josh is telling you he does have skin in that game. His skin in the game is the lexicography, not his atheism. Is that fair or no?
Well, without putting words into his mouth, I think what he's trying to say is he has the right to speak out on issues like that are, you know, connected to his
Exactly.
expertise, which is
If he
ancient
wants-
and stuff. But like the skin in the game part, what I think
I'm
that
I'm just being charitable.
that's an
that's-
emotional investment that Joel has in it because of the interpretive framework that he has when it comes to the Bible,
Yeah,
because
that's
he's a fundamentalist.
Yep, that's fair. Yep.
And I don't think he can wrap his head around the fact that someone like Dr. Josh or you know, somebody like Dan McClellan or Kip Davis can kind of take a more removed examination of the books of the Bible.
Yep.
Like for him, in fact, I think in his case, he thinks that that's bad. That's automatically wrong-headed. You need to be a believer first and get these things down straight and know that this, you know, read your Bible and do what it tells you, you know, that kind of stuff. And if you don't approach it with that attitude, you're just going to miss the point. It's like, actually what these guys are trying to tell you is that because you're approaching the Bible from that narrow-minded, hard-headed, you know, it's an instruction manual for being a good person. Do it, you sinner. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
You will often be mistaken about what you think those books are telling you.
Yep.
if this is your position, where you're like, hey, Christian apologists might be wrong about this, but there are no ultimate moral implications to that. There are no, humanity is not worse off because Christians are teaching this, because there is no moral absolute. There's no ethical, transcendental standard. If that's your position, then I don't see what the point of debating would
I have no idea what he just said there.
be. It would just be, parsing out different words. And again, I still think
yeah, the words that you're throwing around that I don't know what it is that you're doing. Yeah.
I'd have to adopt your it would come around. The way the conversation would inevitably go is you would end up expecting me to tacitly grant your presuppositions about morality and saying, look, this is just patent.
No.
Nope.
You're
Nope.
playing, he's already going for checkmate when it's not checkmate.
Hey, Peter. Peter wants you to read the first comment that he came in with. He's dunking on Dr. Josh.
Which one is he referring to? This one? The one to you?
No. It's above Nitty's comment about Philemon having no agency.
Oh, okay, right here. I think Dr. Josh lacks the infinite foundation for what can and cannot happen on Joel's stream, so Joel can easily deny him.
Yeah.
Wrong. And if that's not the issue, if the issue is not the morality of the God of the Bible, then I'm not interested in having that conversation because
So he's not interested in having the conversation unless the conversation is about ethics.
Well,
Ethics and
morality,
ethics and morality. Yes.
which again it raises a lot of red flags, because if you are unwilling to approach a study of any of the books of the Bible as anything other than direct moral instruction to you as a Christian, then you are too far gone. Right? He is admitting to being a narrow-minded fundamentalist. So there's no way for him to really get around any of this stuff. So if somebody does come in, even if they're another believer, and tries to state things like, Jesus didn't say he was God in the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe John, people can read into. Actually, Dan McClellan just had a video about that today. It's kind of a longer one, so I haven't watched it yet. But if you say that to Christians, they will lose it. Of course he is. Of course he says that. Like, there's a lot of decent scholarship on it that says he didn't. That's not what's going on there.
Yeah.
But it flies against certain theological dogmas, and so they won't entertain it.
Yep.
And what's really interesting about this is that he's like, well, if we're not going to talk about the morality of it, like Christians have been avoiding the morality of the Bible in exchange for dogma for hundreds of years. They're not interested in having a discussion about morality. They're interested in projecting dogma, and dogma is not morality.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Joel thinks they're the same.
Could be. All right. So there's not much left to this, and then I can wrap this up here pretty quick.
That is the question. I mean, and I say this very respectfully, but your adopted atheism has so many more implications and entailments than you realize.
Did you hear that? Your adopted atheism?
Well, let's say that it does. What if it does have these kinds of entailments? What has that got to do with Dr. Josh not being able to say, hey, when you make claims about these things in the Old Testament, those are not accurate. Those are not in the text.
Yeah.
One doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the other. Now he's getting into this God-bothering, soul-saving shit.
Yeah.
Well, don't you realize what the entailments are? The entailments of my atheism. Well, let's see. Based on certain books in the Bible, it doesn't matter. Based on certain dogmas, it doesn't matter. I could be the mostest, hardest, corest, believingest Christian there is. But if I believe in hard determinism and I'm a Calvinist, I could still be super fucking anxious about the fact that even though I believe in that God and pray, I may not be one of the elect.
Yep.
So I just have to surrender myself to doom. I'm not exactly sure that that's cool either. So
he said he's a Calvinist.
Well, he probably is.
No, he said it early. He said it earlier. He said he's a Calvinist in this stream, I believe. He said he's a Calvinist.
Yeah, well,
but do Calvinists actually separate themselves from other Protestants? Because okay.
No, I mean they're Protestants, but
okay.
But they have, there's Calvinism, there's Wesleyanism, and they've got their different things.
Lutheran and all that kind of thing. Okay.
That is the most important question you can ask is, what is my relationship to God? And to say
that is not the most important question to ask.
I have no relationship to God, and to say that has no implications for anything else in life. I say this very, very respectfully, Josh. That just seems to me to be very foolish. And I don't mean that you're stupid. I mean foolish in the sense
of that's where he took it. So this entire conversation just went into when Dr. Josh said, I don't really care if his atheism is true. Right. He's not convinced. And so now he's going to this, well, look at what's going to happen if you've taken this adopted atheism stance. This renders your entire view of life to just basically being shit.
Well, notice that he's doing a lot of preaching here now, and at this point, he probably doesn't know this because he didn't even know how to pronounce his last name. But he probably is not aware that Dr. Josh was a Bible believing Christian for most of his, for like the first half of his life.
Yeah, majority of it, if I remember correctly. But yeah,
Up until he started getting into like his PhD program, where things started to kind of, you start getting more, because you are taking a harder look at these
I thought
things.
I thought it was during his master's. I thought it was during his Old Testament studies.
I think he said, yeah, it was somewhere in between there.
Anyway, yeah, it doesn't matter either way. Yeah, the
But
more he dove
he
into
was
it,
part of a ministry and all that other kind of stuff. I mean, he
Mhm.
was
Well,
an associate.
he went to Liberty University, for Christ's sake. So
Well, wasn't he an associate pastor somewhere too?
I believe so. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's actually a sermon from him. Somebody found a sermon of his on YouTube.
I got to applaud his patience, because if I were sitting here listening, I'm going to stop you right there, because you're talking to me. You're talking at me like I don't know this, and you haven't asked me a single question about whether I
Mhm.
was a believer. Did I deconstruct, or have I never been a believer? Joel has
Mhm.
not asked him that once.
Nope, he did not. You're right.
He's like, I don't think you
Ignoring the truth.
understand the entailments. I've been to Sunday school. I've heard lots of sermons, listened to lots of songs.
That's
I
what got
don't-
him. If I remember correctly, that's what got Dr. Josh interested in this.
Yeah, and you know what? The entailments of the Christian faith, they, yeah, I think I do know what you think the entailments of disbelief are, but that doesn't mean I agree with you.
Yep.
So I'm not insulting you. I'm glad you came up here, but let me know if you want to have a conversation about the morality of God, or the necessity of God for morality, or even atheism versus Christian theism. I see that your friend Kip or your associate Kip is still making comments in the chat there. Maybe Kip would like to do it, but
Yeah. So that's pretty much it for that. That's pretty much all there is. But then there's this video. I'm going to share this tab instead. So this was the separate video. And right here, I recently had an interesting conversation with an atheist with a PhD and wanted to debate on ethical issues. Oh, he did revise it, and wanted to debate on ethical issues and the Old Testament.
So he's fixed that.
Yeah, I thought, okay, yeah. So he did fix that. Originally, he said this was like something like he wanted to debate ethics and God.
Well, it's still a misleading title, because atheist scholar, does morality come from God? Josh didn't ask that, and I don't think as far as like when he was actually having back.
Oh yeah, you're right.
With
Yeah.
Dr. Bowen, Josh wasn't talking about whether or not morality comes from God. In fact, if he came in even close to saying anything about it, he wasn't interested in talking about that.
No, not at all. So there was somebody wrote down here. Where did that one go? Let me go to newest first. Let's see if I can find it. There's some interesting, yeah, somebody put it in here. Yeah, this was Nick. Okay. I recently debated with an atheist who has a doctorate and wanted to debate on ethics and God. That quote right here was what was originally in the description. Is that quote right there from this Nick Brassing right here. This is now officially the worst and frankly most dishonest description I have yet seen on YouTube. In fact, this was Dr. Bowen clearly laying out why he has no interest in debating the morality of ethics of God, not engaging in debate on that. And it was not a debate either. Dr. Bowen took issue with your interpretation or characterization of the text itself, which is his area of expertise, which he didn't actually take issue with that in any specific way. He was giving examples of where there can be issues with interpretation, and offered to debate and that subject alone. You made perfectly clear that you had absolutely no interest in defending your statements on the text and would only debate morality. And Dr. Bowen rightly declined, given that this is not his area of expertise. But somehow in your mind becomes he wanted to debate on ethics and God? Seriously? If you're not willing to defend your position on the text, then you should just say so. And then calm down, Nick. I didn't write that description, and I've revised it. So that's why I said I think this is collaborated between Joel and Wi-Fi Gospel. I think Wi-Fi Gospel separated it and wrote that out and just wasn't thinking when they wrote it. And they wrote it wasn't inaccurate anyway. If it wasn't inaccurate, why did they revise it?
Right.
I wasn't being dishonest. That's a sin. Well,
Those don't
you
follow.
well, I wasn't being dishonest. Was the person that wrote it being dishonest because they listened to it and didn't understand it, or did they not listen to it at all and just assume that? Because you wrote, I didn't write that description and I've revised it. It wasn't inaccurate anyway. I recently debated with an atheist who has a doctorate and wanted to debate on ethics and God. That was not Dr. Josh's position. That's not what he wanted to debate. And now you're saying it wasn't inaccurate anyway? Then anyone can watch this video and see what happened. Josh and I worked it out and decided not to do the debate. Atheism is intellectually crippling, and every atheist is commanded by God to repent and believe the gospel.
What's that next comment there?
I said the description was dishonest, Joel, which it was. So good for you for correcting it. And if it wasn't inaccurate in any way, then why on earth did you revise it? Stand by it if you think so and simply defend it. And what is your objective basis for saying atheism is intellectually crippling?
Define objective basis as it functions in the atheist worldview. You don't need that.
An objective.
Does objective basis function in an atheist worldview different than it functions in another worldview? And
Yes,
if that's
sure.
the case, then why are you calling it an objective basis?
Yeah, it's relative. It's relative to the worldview. Yes.
Then it's not objective. So,
Yes.
and it is fair to ask a Christian, what do you mean when you say, what is the objective basis for saying that atheism is intellectually crippling? Even if you think the Bible is the objective standard, where in the Bible does it say that being an atheist is intellectually crippling? That's not there.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know why he didn't just revise this to say we were discussing having a debate, but either way, it is what it is. Yep.
Well, I got to get going. I got to run out and do it.
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good to go. We're done with this, so I'm going to go ahead and thanks everybody for joining. See you all later.